And before we begin, before I bring up the text, I want to share my screen and show you some maps. We're right now ready to launch even deeper, to go into the actual temple compound, which consisted of many, many, many differing elements. As I mentioned before, the temple serviced a wide variety of functions, and this entire compound was at the epicenter of these functions. So while the wide plaza of the Temple Mount was where they had the latitude, a lot of space, here we get into all the intricate chambers. And again, the magnitude of this building cannot be understated. This building right here in the center, we're talking about an actual skyscraper. And these chambers, each one of them, they may look small on this map, but they're very, very, very large. And so in general, we have a term called the Azara. Azara means courtyard, right? I'm sure some of you may have heard that term. Azara means courtyard. So there's three Azarat in, Azarat is plural, three Azarat in the temple. And they're known as Ezrat Nashim, the women's courtyard, Ezrat Yisrael, the Israelites' courtyard, and Ezrat Kohanim, the Kohanim courtyard. That doesn't mean that Yisrael, a non-Kohen, cannot go into the Kohen's courtyard. That doesn't mean that a man cannot go into the woman's courtyard. These were just the names given for reasons I will tell you. But suffice it to say that there's three courtyards. What's known as the women's courtyard is this first big courtyard over here in the foreground on the east side of the temple. It's the largest courtyard, and it serves many functions. When we say the Ezrat Nashim, it's not like the women's section in Shul. It has the same name, but it's completely not the same thing. It's just called the Ezrat Nashim because it was a very, very beautiful balcony for the woman, as I'll show you in a second. Then the Ezrat Yisrael and the Ezrat Kohanim, both of them were inside of this inner courtyard over here, where the actual sanctuary, which is called the Heichal, was as well. They're much smaller, but over here was the main function of the temple. The Mizbeach, the altar, was over here, and we're going to see maps, and obviously our 3D tour is going to take us into a very, very beautiful rendition of what this all looked like. All right, so here you go. The Ezrat Nashim Women's Courtyard was a very wide space, and you have over here a bit of a artist's rendition of what the festivities may have looked like during the Sukkot holiday. We have this beautiful porch over here along the rim of the entire courtyard, where the women participate in the festivities. The men are down here with these massive poles, which light up the entire temple, and the light could be seen across Jerusalem. These massive lamps, and I'll show you what it looks like on 3D in a second. But this is the women's courtyard. As you notice, in the corners of the women's courtyard, we have four big, large chambers. The temple has 100, maybe more than 100 chambers. Undergrounds, offices, whole buildings. These four chambers are the largest chambers in the entire temple. And they have very different functions, each one of them. We're going to learn about them now. We have the chamber of the lepers, the chamber of wood, the chamber of the Nazir, and the chamber of the oils. Okay, so now that we have this in our mind, you see this map. This is the east side, Ezrat Nashim, east side. We have this four chambers and this very, very beautiful looking from bird's eye view. You see these steps over here. Let's go dive into the text and read all about it. All right, sit up, get ready. Let's go. Ezrat Nashim. The Ezrat Nashim, the courtyard of women, was 135 cubits long by 135 wide, an exact square. All right, we gotta come to our friend ChatGPT. Let's open it up, ladies and gentlemen, and let's ask our friend over here. Amma measurements. All right. Give us, how much was it? How many cubits did the Mishnah say? 135 by 135. Are we there? 135 by 135. Give us 135 by 135. The AI is very smart. Knows exactly what I'm asking, because from yesterday, we want some visuals over here. Okay, so according to the lesser opinion, we're talking about a space of 45,000 square feet. A standard NBA court is 28.7 by 15.2 meters, which is 436 meters squared. So this area we're talking about is about 9 full basketball courts, or according to the opinion of the higher opinion of the Amma, 15 full basketball courts side by side. All right. 135 Ammas is just under or slightly above one football field. One football field. Okay. It's roughly half a city block square. All right. Tennis players, it's about 16 tennis courts put together. Okay, you get the point. That is how big we're talking about in the Ezrat Nashim. Now, it had 4 chambers in its 4 corners, each of which are 40 cubits. Right? There is an exact square, 40 by 40. Let's go. ChatGPT, 40 by 40. How big is that? All right. How big is that? That's a large modern house, right? The size of a large modern house. Just under or around the size of a full basketball court. That's the size of each of these chambers. That's a big room. That's a very, very big room. Okay, they were not roofed. They had no roof. They were open to the open sky, and so they will be in the time to come. So as I mentioned in the beginning of this tractate, a very fascinating element over here is that the second temple was a hybrid of the first temple and the third temple. And the reason is because the first temple, we had exact instructions from the prophets to King Solomon and to King David before him, and King Solomon, who actually built it, the dimensions and the architectural planning of the entire building. And so it was very precise according to God's word. Then comes Ezekiel, Yecheskel, during the time of the first temple, and he prophesizes about the future temple, looking very differently than what the Jews had. And the Jews come back after the exile in Persia with Ezra the scribe to build the second temple. They don't have the same prophets and the same instructions from God how to build the second temple. All they'd have is the exact plans of the first temple and Yecheskel, Ezekiel's vision of a future temple. But Yecheskel's future temple, which will be the third temple, is not fully understood. The prophet, he's not around anymore, so we don't fully understand, the Jews at the time, how to interpret his prophecies. They know some of it. They can interpret some of it. So the second temple is a hybrid. Anything they were able to glean from the prophecy of Yecheskel of a future temple, they built. And anything they were not able to understand, they did it according to the first temple. So the second temple is sort of a hybrid, which is a beautiful thought in and of itself. But here the Mishnah is telling us a clear element of the temple, which they borrowed from Ezekiel's vision, and they understood it. And one of them is that these 4 main chambers, which we're going to have in the third temple, also obviously is open roofed, is open to the sky. And he quotes Yecheskel, as it says, then he brought me forth into the outer chamber. Yecheskel's talking. His vision of the temple is one of the most fascinating navis out there. If anyone wants to go check it out, it's one of the most fascinating reads. Over there, he describes how an angel is taking, in his own vision, almost like our 3D tour, an angel is taking him in this dream of what the temple looks like, and he's showing him visually everything with a measuring stick. So he says, this angel, he brought me forth into the outer courtyard, and caused me to pass by the four corners of the court. And behold, in every corner of the court, there was a court. That means in every corner of this courtyard, there was its own courtyard, its own sort of structure. In the four corners of the court, there were keturot courts. Keturot means they were not roofed. That means open roofed. Okay, back to our illustration here. This is what it kind of looks like. From bird's eye view, you're going to look, you can be able to see directly in. For what were they used? So let's look at the function, and I'll take you on our 3D tour. Okay, what were they used? What were the functions? All right, here we go. Southeast. Southeast in our illustration is, again, the east is always the front of the temple, and the south is going to be the left of the temple. This is the east, this is the south. So southeast right here. All right, what happens over there in that one? Was the chamber of the Nazarites, where the Nazarites used to boil their shalomim and shave their hair and throw it onto the pot. So everyone knows this, hopefully you know, the concept of a Nazir. The concept of a Nazir is a person who takes a vow for a standard of 3 days, or stipulated more, could be your whole life, depending on the vow, but a standard of 30 days, you're going to refrain from certain pleasures of this world, including cutting one's hair, including drinking wine. And after the 30-day vow is done, the mitzvah is to come to the temple, bring a korban, called the korban shlamim, one of those sacrifices where the meat of the sacrifice is eaten by the owners of the sacrifice. And then that's where you cut your hair, you go to mikvah, and you end your Nazarite sojourn. And so this was a chamber dedicated for these type of people, where they cut their hair and they throw it into the fire, into the pot. All right, this is what it may have looked like. If anyone sees this picture here, you see a pot boiling. They're boiling some meat. I have here a barber, expert barber, and the hair goes under the pot. So that was the function of this chamber. Again, very large chamber. I'm sure there was many different amenities here. Sort of like a Nazir spa. What do you say about that? So, not a bad deal. Not a bad deal. All right. Was there a gym in the temple? Some people want to know. You never know. In the third temple, there might be a gym. Let's go to the next one. The northeastern one. All right, where's northeast? Again, east is the front of the temple, right? The face of the temple is east. North is going to be to the right. Over here is a chamber of the wood. That's what it says exactly in the Mishnah. Was the wood chamber where priests with physical defects used to pick out the wood, which had worms, every piece with a worm in it, being unfit for use on the altar. Here's one of the most beautiful ideas, I must say. Let's bring up the illustration over here. The wood chamber. Okay, the wood chamber. Kohanim. If you're a Kohen, you belong to the family of Kohanim by dint of your birth, right? Your father's a Kohen, you're a Kohen. That's the way it works. Every Kohen has a piece of the temple service. Every Kohen, that's his birthright. Now, it happens to be, the Torah says that a Kohen who has a physical handicap, physical defect, cannot service in the temple. That may be a permanent one, a temporary one. Either way, cannot really do the main service of the temple. That doesn't mean that you can't service the temple at all. It means that you're not part of the regular routine of the Kohanim doing the sacrifices, but there's many things you can still do to service the temple. Again, many, many functions here in the temple. And historically, one of the most beautiful things, any Kohen who had any sort of handicap, they were the first ones in line to be able to do the checking of the wood, which is a very meticulous, very, very special task. And in a way, if you would imagine the handicap parking, or what they call it these days, the full access parking, the full access parking of the temple was here. And maybe they had a ramp. Maybe in the third temple, they'll have an escalator, an elevator to this chamber. I guess in the third temple, Mashiach comes, won't be any sort of handicap at all. But the point is that there's no such thing as a Kohen. We say, go home. Everyone can take part, no matter who, no matter what. The checking of the wood was a very special thing because there was massive logs of wood which were used daily for the altar. And it's very, extremely important that there not be one worm, one insect, dirt on this wood. This wood was pristine to put on the altar. Can't have any worms on it. Can't bring worms onto the altar. And so this was a very, very, very meticulous task of storing the wood, checking the wood, separating the wood. There was a need for a full chamber of just taking care of the wood. And you see an artist rendition over here of what that may have looked like. All right, then let's go to the next chamber. The next chamber, says the Mishnah, the northwestern one was a chamber of those with skin disease, known as the lepers. What would that look like? An illustration. Here we go. This is for someone who has tsarat. At the end of their 7 days of seclusion, they need to go to mikvah. They need to bring a carbon to the temple. So we had a whole chamber to service these people. A whole chamber set aside for the people who you think maybe don't deserve it. No, every Jew belongs. And so in this chamber, it's open roof, but inside you had a mikvah bath. You had probably many more service stations for these people to do their mikvah ritual before being cleansed of this disease. And the southwestern one, the last one. So here we have very fascinating discussion in the Mishnah. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, I forgot what it was used for. It was there, but I don't know what it was used for. Abba Shaul says, I have a tradition that this chamber, they use it to store their wine and oil. And it was called the chamber of oil. Of course, wine and oil are a very, very important part of the temple. Oil was used in many, many, many functions. Wine was used daily to pour on the Mizbeach. As I mentioned here a few times, the sacrifices were not just animal sacrifices. We had sacrifices of spices, of wine, of flour, of breads, of crackers, like anything you can think of in your kitchen was also part of the service to represent the totality of the universe, the totality of life existence. And so wine and oil were stored here, and I'm sure this needed a lot of maintenance and a lot of workers to work here to make sure that things were kept in order. So that's what this chamber was used for. The chamber of the woman had originally been smooth. That means the walls were just straight. But subsequently, they surrounded it with a balcony so the woman can look on from above while the men were below, and they're not mixed together. All right. At this point, I'm going to pause. We'll take you to the 3D tour. We're going to show you what that looked like, that balcony. And here we go. Boom. We are on the eastern side of the temple. And let us walk in. Everyone ready? Going up the steps of the temple. Prepare yourselves. And we walk into the first courtyard through the east gate. This is what's called the Ezrat Nashim. This is, again, the magnitude of this space is what we said, 9 basketball courts worth. Standing in the center of the Ezrat Nashim, let me give you a little bit of a tour. Everyone see around? You see this? You see over here? These wooden pillars protruding from the wall. On any regular time, that's the way it looked. And I'll tell you what their function is in a second, but they go along the rim of the entire courtyard. We're facing east now. And so these 4 large chambers in the corner are the 4 chambers we just discussed. I'm going to take you into them one at a time. Let's go forward. All right. This chamber. Look at this guy. What was this? The oils and the wines we just discussed. Again, open roofed, right? Open roofed over here. Oils and wines. Yep. Looks the interior design here of our 3D may not be up to exactly par. But you can imagine there's shelving, there's ladders, there's categories. Wines and oils were stored over here. All right, let's go out. Let's go now to this chamber over here. Okay. What's happening in this chamber? This chamber was the Nazirim, the Nazir. You see, the haircut station over here. And we have the pot with the fire, a washing station. And I'm sure this thing can be populated with many, many more things servicing the Nazirim. All right, let's Let's continue across the courtyard. This is Lishkas Haitzim. This is where all the wood was stored. See all this wood? And this Cohen over here checking the wood to make sure there's no worms at all. All right. Massive chamber open to the sky. And let's continue on to the fourth chamber that we discussed. All right. Let's get around this building here. This is Lishkat HaMetzarim. This is for the lepers. And over here, we had a mikvah. Look at this beautiful mikvah. Beautiful mikvah. Probably needs a roof on top of the mikvah. But this beautiful mikvah for all the Mitzarim. Now, here's a very interesting thing, which I'm going to show you. Another function of the temple, before we get to that, let's actually show you this. So, everyone wants to know what these wood things are. Well, let's look at this. We are going to enter, in the temple, we're going to enter another temple, okay? This is going to be another view of Simchat Beit HaShoeva. During the Sukkot holiday, this entire woman's courtyard transforms. Watch this. Boom. Wow. All of a sudden, we have a beautiful balcony built on top, special for the women. They have their own space on top. Listen, on a regular day, the woman could be down here, whatever. But when we're dealing with Simchat Beit HaShoeva, we want to give the women their own space for the dancing. And the men will be down here. And does anybody want to see what it looks like on the balcony up there? Yeah, let's go. But first, does everyone notice these massive, massive golden pillars with ladders, with lights to light up the entire temple during festivities at night? Here, let's jump to the top. What would it look like from the top? Woo! Look at this. Standing on top of these towers. Over here, massive jugs of oil with these massive wicks could burn the entire night. And from on top over here, you can see kind of a bird's eye view of what the temple looks like from on top. All right, ready to jump down? 1, 2, 3, bam. Okay, we're down here. Let's continue forward and let's jump onto the women's balcony. All right, this is what the women's balcony may have looked like. Maybe there were seats. Actually, there's no seats in the temple. All right, very important. But this is the women's balcony, and they could see the festivities from on here, from on top. All right, so this is a view of the Simchat Beit HaShoeva. Now let's get back to our regular programming. Boom, let's jump into the bubble. Okay, back to daytime, back to regular programming. Everyone notice this building right here? This building right here? Okay, this is a very fascinating piece. Okay, as we mentioned, the temple was multifunctionary. One of the functions of the temple was, this is where you had the, let's find it here. No. This is where you had the judicial system of the Jews. The way it worked is, and I'll just give you in a very, very quick overview, is that we had a judicial system where every city, every district, like every large city had a Sanhedrin, had a small Sanhedrin, a small court of 20, a panel of 23 judges. I mean, that's small. I mean, it's not so small, but compared to the Supreme Court, it's small. 23 judges. Now, every town in Israel had a court of 3 judges. A small town doesn't have a full functioning court. Maybe they met once a day, maybe they met a few times a week. But the way it was is that for small disputes or for small court cases or civil misdemeanors and obviously non-capital crimes or small crimes, you had a court of 3 judges that would judge. Now, a court of 3 judges mainly is monetary function, meaning they don't have too much jurisdiction when it comes to criminal behavior so much. So every larger city, the district and larger city had panel of 23 judges, which had full rights for capital for capital for capital offenses, of course, but even any serious crimes. And during the market day, you would go to the central court of your district of 23 judges. Now, there was an appellate system. I don't know. I believe in America there's two rounds, right? You have the appellate court and you have the Supreme Court. In Judaism, you had 3 rounds. So you had in Jerusalem, you had 2 appellate courts and 1 Supreme Court. The 2 appellate courts and the Supreme Court were in the temple compound, all 3 of them. I mean, sorry, the first appellate court was on Har HaBayis on Temple Mount, and then you had the second appellate court and the Supreme Court on Har HaBayis. And obviously, the way it works is that if there is a ruling that you want to appeal, and there's a mechanism, if you have extra evidence, etc., you could bring it to the appellate court, and as well as if you had 2 courts in the country which instruct on religious law or the like separately, they're very differently. Now there's an argument between 2 courts. Both courts will bring it to the appellate court, and the appellate court outside in Har HaBayis, I'll show you where that is. Let's go out to the right here. This is Har HaBayis. This is the Temple Mount, right before we get into the compound. Right here, we're on top of this is the compound. So right here, Sanhedrin Ketana Har HaBayis. It's called Sanhedrin Ketana, the smaller Sanhedrin, the first layer of appellate court. They function right over here. So all court cases from around the land will come over here. The Rambam Maimonides describes to us what this may have looked like. This chamber looks like a little bit cramped, but you can see here the judges wearing talisim. They wear talis during judgment. 23 of them in a semicircle, so all the judges can see each other. Very important fact. And then in front of them, you had 3 rows of potential judges. These are students, not confirmed yet. They would stand in the 3 rows, always on the bench, so that if you had the need to add judges as we go along, they're there and ready. So they sit through the court cases and they're always there and ready to be added to the bench. Why would you need to be added to the bench? Because the 23, you would say, is a majority rules. But when it comes to capital offenses, you can't win by just one simple majority. You need to have a super majority of 2. So if they're evenly divided, the court is evenly divided, you may have to add a judge and rerun the trial to come to a different decision. So that's the first appellate court. Now, the second level of appellate court is found in the Ezrat Nashim over here. So if it's a hung court, which is possible, again, as I described, because you need more than a simple majority, then all of the defendant and the plaintiffs and their witnesses and the judges all going to walk across the courtyard and take seats over here in the second appellate court, where over here you have another very similar looking style, 23 judges with talisim facing each other and judging the case. This is called, again, the Sanhedrin Ketana. This is called the Sanhedrin, the small Sanhedrin of the Ezrat Nashim, the second appellate court. Now, cases that are hung courts over here are cases that need to be brought to the Supreme Court. Some cases go directly to the Supreme Court, like any case that deals with the Kohen Gadol or king or any high dignitary, directly to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court had 71 judges, the highest judges of the land. They were over here. This building over here. Everyone see this purple building over here? The Sanhedrin sat in this building, which is even deeper into the temple, which is by the Ezrat Yisrael, by the Israelite courtyard. And we are out of time, so this is the last thing we'll show. We didn't finish the parak, but that's fine. We will continue next week. Well, let me just show you if our system over here has the Sanhedrin. All right, everyone is getting a peek at next week's discussion when we get into the inner courtyard. Very fascinating. Let's see. All right. Lishkas Hagazis. This is the place of the Sanhedrin. Welcome inside. All right, you see this? 71 judges. Ooh. a lot less than 71 over here. So we're going to have to bring this up. Another mistake we found. But this is where the Sanhedrin would sit, the Supreme Court of the land. And here we exit. The Supreme Court has its own entrance from the back. And we are outside the temple court compound. Okay. And with that, we conclude our class today. We learned about the women's courtyard, the various functions. We learned about the appellate system, the judges, the Sanhedrin. And we have one more Mishnah to the end of chapter 2. We're making good headway out of 5 chapters. Be'ezrat Hashem, by the end of next week, we should finish maybe chapter 3.5 or 4. And the week after that, we'll be able to finish chapter 5. I hope you all enjoyed. I want to wish you a tremendous, beautiful Shabbat. See you all in shul. And tell all your friends about the class.